When the leaked practice footage began circulating, it didn't take long for timelines to ignite, group chats to light up, and narratives to harden. In the WNBA ecosystem, where access is limited and behind-the-scenes moments are rarely meant for public consumption, even a short clip can take on a life of its own.
Look, I don't think anybody needs me to rehash the Sophie Cunningham story. Obviously, the Fever trade for her in the offseason that leads to just an explosion in popularity because she came off like such a badass, and obviously because she is a badass. She has that moment with JC Sheldon in that Sun game, protecting Caitlin Clark, or laying down the law, if you will.
This time, the center of that storm was Sophie Cunningham, and the reaction that followed was not quiet, measured, or diplomatic. It was explosive. And in many ways, inevitable. The footage itself was unremarkable in a technical sense. No injuries. No illegal drills. No secret tactics being exposed. What made it combustible was context. A practice environment, raw and unfiltered. Competitive language. Visible frustration.
Something that Sophie Cunningham has capitalized on. Not to mention, she is a good part of the team, and there is the popularity that comes from the proximity of being around Caitlin Clark and playing for the Indiana Fever, and because people were desperate or yearning for someone to step up for Caitlin Clark in that way.
The kind of intensity players experience daily but fans rarely see. Once the clip escaped its original setting, it was stripped of nuance and dropped into a social media machine that thrives on outrage, speculation, and moral theater. Within hours, Cunningham was being analyzed not as an athlete in preparation, but as a character in a story others were writing for her. Her response was swift and unapologetic. Cunningham didn't issue a sanitized statement through a PR intermediary. She went directly to social media and made her position unmistakably clear. She called out the leak itself, questioned the motives behind it, and rejected the framing that had begun to form around her name. To some, it read as defensive. To others, it felt overdue. What it unquestionably did was reassert control in a moment when control had been taken from her. To understand why Cunningham's reaction resonated so loudly, you have to understand the environment she operates in. Practice footage is sacred ground for professional athletes. It's where mistakes are made deliberately. Where tempers flare. Where players push boundaries without an audience. The leak wasn't just a privacy violation, it was a breach of trust. Cunningham's anger wasn't about optics. It was about principle. Someone inside the circle, or close enough to it, had decided that engagement mattered more than integrity. The online reaction followed a predictable arc. Clips were reposted without timestamps or context. Commentary accounts added captions that nudged interpretation in specific directions. Armchair analysts dissected body language like it was courtroom evidence. The footage became a Rorschach test. People saw what they wanted to see: aggression, passion, attitude, leadership, arrogance, competitiveness. All of it projected onto a few seconds of practice intensity. Cunningham understood immediately what was happening, and her response cut through the noise because it refused to play the expected role. She didn't apologize for competing hard. She didn't soften her language to make it more palatable. She drew a line and dared people to cross it knowingly. In doing so, she forced a different conversation, one not about her tone or demeanor, but about why fans feel entitled to moments that were never meant for them. There's an uncomfortable double standard at play here, one Cunningham's response implicitly exposed. Male athletes are routinely praised for visible intensity in practice footage. Clips of shouting, trash talk, or heated exchanges are reframed as edge or leadership. In women's sports, the same behavior is often scrutinized as a personality flaw. Cunningham didn't explicitly name that disparity, but her refusal to self-censor made it impossible to ignore. The outrage wasn't really about what she did. It was about how comfortable people are judging women athletes through a narrower emotional lens. What also fueled the backlash was timing. Cunningham has never been a background figure. She plays with emotion, talks with confidence, and doesn't dilute her presence to make others comfortable. That makes her polarizing, especially in an online culture that rewards certainty over complexity. The leaked footage became a convenient hook for critics who already had a narrative ready. Her reaction didn't create division, it revealed it. From a team perspective, the situation raised questions that extended far beyond one player. Who had access to the footage? Why was it recorded? How did it leave the building? Those questions matter because trust is foundational in professional sports. If players start wondering which moments might end up online, practice environments change. Risk-taking declines. Authenticity erodes. Cunningham's outburst, while personal, also functioned as a warning shot on behalf of every player who depends on that space remaining protected. Her tone online was sharp, but it was also precise. She didn't lash out indiscriminately. She targeted the act, not the audience. She framed the issue as one of respect, not ego. That distinction mattered to players around the league, many of whom quietly signaled support. Even those who didn't publicly comment understood the stakes. Today it was Cunningham. Tomorrow it could be anyone. The media response was more cautious, but not necessarily more balanced. Headlines leaned into the word explodes because conflict drives clicks. Few took the time to interrogate why the footage was leaked in the first place. Fewer still addressed the broader implications for player privacy. Cunningham's reaction was treated as the story, rather than the symptom. That framing mirrors a larger problem in sports coverage, where reaction is easier to monetize than root cause. Cunningham herself didn't attempt to control the narrative beyond stating her truth. She didn't follow up with damage control. She didn't retreat. That consistency reinforced her message. She wasn't angry because she'd been misunderstood. She was angry because she'd been exposed without consent. There's a difference, and it's one the internet often ignores. In the days that followed, the cycle moved on, as it always does. New controversies replaced old ones. But the residue remained. Fans became more aware, if only briefly, of how fragile the boundary is between access and exploitation. Players were reminded that nothing stays contained unless everyone agrees it should. And Cunningham solidified a reputation she's long embraced: she will not be quiet to make others comfortable. What made her response powerful wasn't volume. It was clarity. She didn't ask for sympathy. She demanded accountability. In an era where athletes are expected to absorb scrutiny with grace regardless of fairness, that refusal felt disruptive. It also felt honest. There's a temptation to frame moments like this as distractions, but that misses the point. This wasn't about basketball preparation being derailed. It was about agency. About who gets to decide which versions of an athlete are public. Cunningham's explosion wasn't a loss of control. It was an assertion of it. In the long run, this incident is unlikely to define her career. What it will do is add another layer to how fans and media interpret athlete reactions. Not every strong response is a meltdown. Not every refusal to smile is a problem. Sometimes it's simply a boundary being enforced. Cunningham didn't ask the internet to understand her. She asked it to stop pretending it was entitled to everything. That message landed harder than the leaked footage ever could. And in a league still negotiating how visibility, respect, and professionalism coexist, her response may end up mattering more than the clip that triggered it.